Namaste and welcome. Today I am going to speak about the Gurukul system of education in ancient India, or more precisely Bharat. The Gurukul is an ancient system of education that was prevalent all over the Indian subcontinent before the Mughal and British invasions. The Guru Shishya teacher student relationship was sacrosanct and considered to be more important than the parent child relationship. In the larger educational system, there were broadly two different educational formats, you can say. The first was the sannyasi marg or path of renunciation, where the yogis and saints would learn from gurus within particular lineages. This educational format was usually one on one or in very small and intimate groups. The aspirant was required to renounce their life goals, material possessions, and family to pursue this route. The second educational format was the Gurukulas or the schools, usually in every village, which was the education for the majority. Both these types of educational formats were interconnected and supported each other. The emphasis to a large extent was on spiritual realization, though in the Gurukulas many other subjects were taught as well. In the sannyasi marg or path, the term sannyasi means to live a life of renunciation. Sannyas ashram is also a term used to signify the fourth stage of life in Hinduism, usually from 70 years until death, where one should ideally renounce material possessions. For those who wish to renounce their life and devote themselves to the spiritual path, they had to find a guru who would accept them as a student. Usually, the training in meditation and other yogic practices would be very intense and would require complete devotion from the student. The learning period could last anywhere from 6 to 24 years, depending on the lineage and, of course, the student. After this period, most lineages would require the student to travel around the breadth and width of the country for the same amount of time as their studies, which would be 6 to 24 years again. They would have to travel without money, beg for alms, and not stay in one place for more than 2 nights in a row. In this way, they would not get attached to any one place. This also brought the saint in touch with the daily realities in different parts of India. It was believed that a saint must first learn to flow like a river. In most villages, these sannyasis or renunciates would be provided with basic accommodation, which would usually be a wooden bed, and food in the Gurukula or schools. For the day or two that they would stay in the village, they would teach the kids and the adults about the topics they were proficient with in exchange for the food and accommodation. For example, a sannyasi adept in pranayama breathing techniques would teach that, while another adept in Ayurveda would teach about herbal remedies and so on. In this way, even though the barrier of entry into the yogic lineages was very high, requiring complete renunciation, the teachings and knowledge from the lineages could still spread across ancient India or Bharat. Now, coming to speak about the Gurukuls itself for the schools, every Gurukul would have a guru or a teacher from the local village. The guru and the students from the village would usually live together in the Gurukul. The Gurukul would always have open doors for other yogis and saints that might be passing by. In this way, students in the village not only learn basic language, ethics, maybe Vedic maths from the local teacher, but might also for short periods of time get to learn about Ayurveda, about Jyotish, which is Vedic astrology, yoga, and other philosophies through yogis that might pass by. The yogis would usually be constantly moving from place to place, and their teachings would be likened to the concept of the workshop in the modern context. Next up, I'm going to speak about the fall of the Gurukul system and the birth of global yoga. Through this system of education, ancient India reached what you could call spiritual maturity. Spiritual teaching and a non material way of life was woven into the very fabric of the education system. The network of traveling gurus also carried news and knowledge throughout the country. Unfortunately, this was the prime reason why subsequent invaders saw this system of education as the biggest challenge to their rule. The Mughal invasion of India began with full force in the 15th century, whereby this system of education was continually eroded, with Gurukuls being destroyed and replaced with mosques and madrasas or Islamic schools. Before the demolition of the Gurukuls began, it is estimated that nearly 800,000 Gurukuls existed across India. In the year 1500, there was approximately one Gurukul per 150 people. The system of education faced its final death blow with the advent of the British Empire. The British lords and governors quickly realized that an uprising against them could easily arise through the networks of Gurukulas. Additionally, they were unable to erode India's cultural identity. In 1858, Lord Macaulay passed the Indian Education Act, which outlawed the Gurukuls and gave precedence to Western style schools and education. The yogic and saintly traditions became more insular and their knowledge well guarded to escape the eyes of the British administration. The Gurukuls, on the other hand, completely withered as physical schools were demolished and gurus that continued to teach on the sly were punished. This was a cause of concern to many yogis and saints. They got together during these massive festivals called the Kumbh Melas. These are spiritual festivals or gatherings that have been happening approximately once in every 4 years in India for over 5,000 years now. So many lineages shared the belief that yoga and its culture needed to be brought to the West for it to survive. At this time, many students that followed the sannyasi path were taught English and trained specifically to go and spread yoga in the West. Not all succeeded in their mission, but we often hear the names of those that did. Vivekananda and Yogananda were two such pioneers. The movement and vision to bring yoga to the world in the mid and late 1800s is coming to fruition today, with yoga having reached almost all corners of the world. This possibly might not have been the case if the Gurukul system and its underlying yogic culture were not on the brink of extinction. That's all for today's video. If it was useful to you, do like this video and subscribe as it helps me greatly. Namaste, and I hope to see you again soon.